going to talk to each other. I'm not just going to ask the question. I think that's, just getting in there and just having the discussions. Hi, everybody. We're live. Good afternoon, Facebook family. Combos. We're going to wait for people to come into the room. Good afternoon. How's everybody doing today on the live?
Hanging in.
Good.
Happy to be here. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
It's been so much going on. I was telling everybody with my new position with Portland Opera and another wonderful position I'm starting with another company that I can't announce it yet, and it's just exciting and overwhelming at the same time. So, but I'm blessed to be doing the thing.
Yeah. Indeed.
I'm going to share it to my my fan page quickly, and then we can get started. Yes. Can everybody tell us where they're tuning in from? Where we're starting the stream from? All the good things. Denise?
I'm in the Bay Area, south of San Francisco.
Marty?
I'm in the Hudson Valley, upstate New York.
Miss Leslie?
I'm coming in from London, UK.
Yes. In Nadege?
Coming in from Minneapolis,
Minnesota. Yes, it's so wonderful to have you all here this afternoon, and thank you for agreeing to come and sit with Kiki Combos and chat. I know Denise and Nadege pretty well because I've worked at Minnesota Opera, and also Denise I know from San Francisco, the new chairwoman of the SFJAZZ and the board of SFJAZZ, which is fantastic. Leslie, I've admired your work and you starting your organization and being a woman in the early music industry as a harpsichordist. We've not worked together yet, but I look forward to, collaborating with you.
Love that.
And yes. And Marty, I've been a YouTube fan of her videos because she's prolific in all of the African American art song, that genre. And every time I'm looking for a new song, I go to one of Marty's page or one of her pages, and I stalk her repertoire. And so when I reached out to her, we know each other through people. But so, when I reached out to her and I was like, I'm one of your fans. So anyway, it's so wonderful to have all of you here this afternoon. Hey, Kenny Overton. Hey, Cameo. Yes, so I'm going to start by introducing briefly my amazing panel of women. We'll start with Miss Denise Young-Smith, soprano. Should I say dramatic soprano, Denise?
You made dramatic.
Dramatic soprano, yes. It's one of the most prominent African-American female executives in Silicon Valley. Denise was Apple's vice president of inclusion and diversity and reported to Tim Cook for 20 years, is now the executive in residence at Cornell Tech. Ms. Smith works with students in building early career stage awareness of inclusive leadership and diverse talent. And she is a Carnegie Hall, soloist, has gone all around singing both opera and jazz. And I'm so excited to have Denise here. She's also, as I said, the chairwoman of the board of SFJAZZ and a brilliant leader in our industry.
Thank you.
Yes. Miss Nadege Souverain, is that it, Nadege?
It's tiny correction, Nadege Souvenir. I know everybody always wants to make the souvenir fancier than it is, and it's just plain old like a gift shop.
Nadege Souvenir, yes. Serves as the Senior Vice President of Operations and Learning at the St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation. In her role, she oversees grant administration, HR, and IT. Nadege joined the foundation in 2016. And her background is in dance, which I did not know. dance, arts administration, and law. She's fancy, fancy, smancy, and is also on the chair of Minnesota Opera, which I absolutely, absolutely love that company. And I'm so happy that you're here with me. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Come on, Ryan, get the contracts. Oh, we lost Leslie. That's okay. I'll get to her. Dr. Marty Sladen is a soprano. As I said, I'm one of her fans, an ethnomusicologist. She's was the core lecturer for music humanities and the lecturer in music from 2016 to 2017. She specializes in vocal studies and African American music, and is also the executive director and co-founder of the Harry T. Burleigh Society. That's so amazing. This is incredible. Marty's research has been supported by the Ford Foundation, Mellon, Woodrow Wilson Foundation, as well as Social Science Research Council. She's a frequent lecturer and recitalist and has offered programs at Bard College, Brooklyn College, Columbia University, Reed College, all the fancy colleges. She holds degrees from Oberlin and a doctorate from Columbia University. Welcome, ladies. My panel is so fierce right now. I don't know where she is, but I said if I was going to be in leadership, I was going to go all the way out. All the way out. I'm so proud to know each of you and so inspired by all of you. Where do I begin? How did you all come to where you are now? Anybody can start. Let's you take the floor. Nadege.
Oh my. You asked the big opening question. How did I come to where I am now? Super indirectly. So, which I think is everyone's path a little bit, but started out, in college, I was a dancer, a modern dancer. That feels like ages ago. My body doesn't know how to do those things anymore. But then realized that, being an artist wasn't what I wanted to do for my career, but really appreciated the work in the dance company on the administrative side. So that led me to graduate school for arts administration. So I actually did that sort of right out of undergrad and worked at the Children's Theater Company in Minneapolis for a little bit. And then for reasons that are not fully clear, started to get an itch to go to law school. I think when I was a little kid, that had been my, pat answer. What are you going to be when you grow up? A lawyer. So I thought, maybe I should actually check it out. Went to law school thinking full well that I was going to be a corporate lawyer dealing with, the fun contracts, all of that stuff because of my background, right? I wasn't a theater major. I wasn't going to be arguing in courts. Turns out I love that. And so after law school, practiced for 8 years as a litigator in two of the law firms in town, did complex commercial litigation, did some trademark, did stuff in the financial services industry, and, got some really great experiences, but did not feel quite fulfilled, did not sort of feel like that's where I wanted to be. And so started looking at other avenues and found argued my way into philanthropy, convinced them that they should hire somebody who had no philanthropy background, and have been in the philanthropy space for the last 4.5 years. Doing this work at the St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation. And then sort of alongside of all of that, I have been involved in arts organizations in town in some way or another, largely because I went to graduate school here and worked at the Children's Theater. Once I became a lawyer, my friends started knocking on my door and saying, hey, do you want to be on a board? Hey, do you want to, be on my committee for whatever it is? And that's actually how I got to Minnesota Opera. A friend happened to be working there that I went to graduate school with. I'd never seen an opera in my life. And she convinced me to start joining her, I think, on Thursday nights to watch the dress rehearsals with some of the other Minnesota Opera colleagues. So I can't remember which was the first opera I saw at a dress rehearsal. And I did that for a little bit and then started going for real and, joined their young professionals group Tempo. And then after that, joined the board, which I've been on now for 9 years.
Wow. So you've been there long before I even sang there. That's amazing.
And I was a baby when I got there.
Well, they must have saw your potential, right? That's fantastic. And I love Minneapolis. It's a fantastic city. Yeah. Denise, tell us about you.
Wow. So a lot of similarities, a lot of parallels. And I resonate with, that kind of indirect and circuitous way, and path that I think, many of us encounter. I grew up loving the arts, everything about it. And it wasn't just, kind of a passion of something that, I like to participate in. It really helped me to establish my identity and establish my voice. I grew up like, many, wonderful, loving Black family, and like many, grew up in church, and, community was strong. But, from the time I was 4 years old, I was doing creative things. I was dancing, I was singing, I was writing, all of those things. And that was pretty much, my world. And one thing, about that time in my life is that I had a different kind of a voice than what I was hearing in the Black community that surrounded me at that time. And, I felt a little bit kind of out of sync, in some ways. And, but I would try. I was trying to sing like Shaka and Aretha and everybody else. It was so tragic. It was just not working. And I had the good fortune of having, as we all have, someone that sees us, at an early age. I had the good fortune of having a choir director, a church choir director who was, learned and traveled and really understood so much about life. And he looked at me and kind of pulled me aside, and he said, okay, stop trying to sound like that person and be that person. And he introduced me to Leontine's repertoire, to repertoire that when I heard it, I was like, oh, there I am. That's my voice. That's where I am, right? But interestingly enough, and I had, a wonderful mother from New York, and my father was from the South. So strong Louisiana background from my father. My mother was from New York. She believed in the arts and exposed me to everything artistic. I think I spent every summer going back to New York and with my family. But my father's family was very dogmatic. They were educators, and they were very dogmatic about, okay, little girl, all that stuff is really great, but you have to go to school and you must get your education, because as a Black woman, you have to be independent and you have to be able to take care of yourself in this world. So I tried my best to kind of straddle that direction, that I received very early messaging from my family. And so I, went to school, and I was fortunate enough to go to an HBCU, but I went to school and I followed kind of a business path and direction. And I ended up at Apple in kind of the late 90s. And that turned into a 22-year career unexpectedly. And it was interesting because, to Josh's point, I certainly didn't see, what would ultimately be the outcomes. And I just kept doing the things that I thought were impactful, that I thought were meaningful, trying to, I was often a one or a first or an only, in many rooms, as I'm sure we could all relate to. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that. But I was taught in my upbringing that when you get those opportunities, you forge ahead. That's our responsibility. We suit up, and this is what we do, right? And I did that, and long story short, I ended up on a team of people that was confidential at the time, 20 some years ago, that designed the entire blueprint footprint experience for the Apple stores.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it was interesting because, when I talk about that, still 2 decades later, people go, really? Right? It's like, it's unfathomable to people that a Black woman could have been behind that entire shift of an entire industry, or one of the people behind that, right? So, I was very fortunate in a lot of my kind of career outcomes, but I always held on to my love of music and the arts. So that's it's kind of a short version of my story.
That's amazing, Denise. Oh, that is amazing.
Thank you.
Yes. Marty?
I too have very similar experiences to Nadege and Denise. I grew up in Cincinnati, which was a great place for a singer child to be, in that I had rich experiences singing in church, with the very tremendous traditional encouragement of what Black church experiences and worship can be, and was able to really explore what I took it very naturally, which was that Whitney Houston was a force, and I wanted to be like her, sing like her, and that Kathleen Battle was a force, and I wanted to be like her and sing like her. And I mean, as an adult, I recognized how fortunate I was to not have a conflict between those two very different types of women and singers, because I was singing at church and at CCM in their prep program, and having Cincinnati has a lot of choirs, right? So there was a lot of opportunity as a child that I ate right up. And like Denise said, it was tremendously shaping for my identity. And that was, I mean, the singing, it was in me. It is in me. And so that was the beginning. And then as I got a little bit older, into those big decision years around high school and thinking about career, pressures came in, that from family and culture, around the importance of professionalizing in a very particular way. And growing up in the industrial Midwest, right? Like that meant being a good worker and getting good degrees, and certainly giving back and participating in your community, right? Like but a very specific, in a specific way, that I complied with, which led me into a whole, ended up being fairly robust period in academia. Took me away from my singing, and I'm now at a turning point to turn back to it. And I mean, I'm just at that point in life and just learning how I want to spend it.
Yes.
Without being forced, and having learned the hard lessons in my own journey of attending to things that weren't in my heart. And in that reflection, I saw, for example, we could take the YouTube videos that I adore. I want to make more, right? Like adored making. I had a wonderful collaborator with most of those artists, Wodehouse, who my husband connected me with, taught me about production. Like it was just an amazing world. And I love art song, Karen, as you know, that's my favorite set of things to sing.
Yes.
But I learned that I am my best and able to do the things I like to do, singing, number one, and two, helping other singers who look like me sing the way they want to sing through singing.
Yes.
For me, I was not able to do that in academia or in other paths. That's what brought me to the Burleigh Society. Harry T. Burleigh was a leader in himself, being a singer at the turn of the 20th century. I mean, before, right? Like giving us even the solo concert spiritual first. He sang and he helped other singers. And that's what we do at the Burleigh Society. And I love being able to do that in unconventional ways, like bringing student singers, the Fifth Jubilee singers, to a Carnegie Hall stage, and telling them, you are already professional and you are here and we will treat you as professionals and we will take you seriously. And the seeds that get planted, right, in those singers and people and other people watching them, what happens with that? Phenomenal. And then taking singers like Kenny Overton, right?
Yeah.
And being like, can we talk about what's behind all of your amazingness and what buoys you? And can we, right, like, in addition to hearing you sing, and inverting with the Burleigh Society, we get to invert all of these expectations and, you know, flip the scripts of what Black singers can do, which is phenomenal. So that's my path into how I got here to this day in this moment. And I have to tell you, Karen, as we were saying right before we got on, I think that what you're doing and making space for these conversations is so tremendous. And I know you're hearing that, but I just want to say it again. It's fantastic. And I'm thrilled to be a part. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it blesses me every day. Every day I think about this platform that I built, and it was just so that I could speak to my friends and people that I admire and I love and I, you know, respect. And it's just grown into this other thing that it's all divine. I have nothing. I'm just here. Every guest, it comes to me, the spirit, it's, I'm not going to cry. I am not this time. Oh, I'm not going to cry. But so happy to have you back, Leslie.
Yeah.
Welcome
Sorry,
back.
my internet. We had a storm here earlier today, and the internet just blew out. So I apologize for that.
Oh, please, no worries. I mean, listen, yeah. we're just holding on because Marty says just a storm her way too.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read briefly a little bit about you, Leslie, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yes, Leslie Kwan is first-generation Guyanese American harpsichordist, entrepreneur, and arts executive. Highlights of Leslie's career include founder and harpsichordist of l'Academia Baroque Orchestra in Boston, Massachusetts, and senior marketing director roles at the Boston Symphony Orchestra, Handel and Haydn Society, and the Shinnick, right, Foundation. Yeah. Europe's only, what's that, BAM Orchestra, Black and, what is it? Black
minority
and
ethnic.
Yes, Black and minority
ethnic.
Yes, orchestra based in London. As of October 2019, Leslie became the founder and managing director of Lionsgate Music, an innovative chamber music series exclusively for hospitals that specialize in cancer and pediatrics throughout the UK, the United Kingdom. Miss Kwan lives in London. Yes, ma'am. So tell us how you got to the space that you are now, to where you are. Were you from originally, and how you got to music?
So I was born and raised in New York. I lived actually almost about 4 years in Guyana when I was a little kid with my grandmother, and then moved back to the States to be with my parents. But most of my history is in New York. So I grew up on Long Island, and I went to LaGuardia High School. I was a pianist, learned the viola. Manhattan School of Music prep, so Lincoln Center was my backyard essentially, and it was quite a privilege. My parents don't have classical music training, but they were really, really passionate about supporting me. So I feel incredibly blessed, and I'm the firstborn, so I couldn't screw up. I had to make sure I was on point with everything. But my passion for music was from a very early age. My mom said I came out wiggling my fingers out of her womb, so it was pretty much a done deal that I was going to be a musician. But oddly enough, as a high school kid, I knew that I was great at piano, I was great at viola, but I still wasn't content yet, which is a pretty interesting space to occupy, especially in a high school at LaGuardia, where, you know, everyone is so on top of their game, and you're all in the same kind of headspace, trying to do the best you can and making the best use of your talent. But somewhere along the way, I discovered the harpsichord, and it was quite an emotional experience. I was actually pursuing a degree in education because wasn't still sure if I wanted to be a performer. And one afternoon, I was listening to Bach's double violin concerto in my parents' house. It was the second movement. And my mom came into the room where I was because she couldn't hear me doing what I was doing. And I was just sitting there crying. And that had never happened to me as a pianist before. And so she said, "So what's going on?" I said, I think I love Baroque music, and I think I love the harpsichord." And she said to me, "Well, you're going to need to buy your own instrument this time." Which of course it totally made sense, because, you know, they'd spent a lot of money on my training. And once I fell in love with the harpsichord, that was pretty much it. I felt like I came home. I don't know if it was necessarily the combination of the gut strings, the lowered pitch, you know, everything performed at 415, but I felt that I had finally found my sonic identity, and that was really huge after spending, you know, 20 years of my life training as a musician. So it was all full blast after that. I pursued my master's. I went to Manus for my master's, and then on to Stony Brook to do my DMA, which I didn't finish, but his life took a turn, and I got married and moved up to Boston, found myself in Boston, a completely different city, totally different energy, and also basically the capital of early music in the United States. So starting there was really fascinating, and my start was not immediate. I actually had to find a job in another career because things for my now ex-husband was in tech, and so it wasn't working. So I got a job at Chanel because I needed a job, and I just went in and applied for it, and the woman hired me because she'd never had a harpsichordist apply for a job in luxury fashion.
I'm sure.
But she felt that my dedication as an artist, I would understand how to work with clients, and I didn't know what she was talking about. I just knew I needed a paycheck. And around that same time, my mother was diagnosed with stage 3 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It was very, very serious. And she was in the hospital for about 7 years, of the first 7 years we lived in Boston. And so during that time, I had an epiphany when I would go down to visit her in New York from time to time, you know, putting music on her iPod that was live as opposed to recorded music. And she was in a hospital, a pretty famous hospital, but they still didn't have a music program, and I didn't even know what that meant. I just know that when I put music on the iPod for her, and my sisters did, and my brother did, her mood would shift. And I thought, well, this is kind of cool. If she can shift like this in the bedroom getting chemo, what would this do if I were to bring this to a hospital? And just fast forward a couple years later, I decided to start an orchestra with a colleague of mine, a Baroque orchestra specializing in French Baroque rep, because no one was doing that in Boston. One of the things I learned from my time at Chanel actually was to learn how to market yourself. I mean, that was quite the education, being there in sales and just understanding how they get their people to come back and spend $5,000 on a jacket repeatedly, 4, 5, 6 times a year. You know, the whole relationship development aspect of it, which I then turned into patron development for myself when I founded my own group. So it was quite an education. And when I started to launch this with a friend of mine, it was just with the intent of making music with friends, as everybody wants to. But then I had a chat with a colleague at the Boston Foundation, this guy named Javier Torres, and he was really quite supportive. And he said, you know, you're a young Black woman, you're a harpsichordist, and you're in a very, very white city that has a lot of white musicians specializing in early music. So what's your legacy going to be? And I just remember sitting back in my chair feeling like he soccer punched me, because no one had ever talked to me about legacy. I mean, as a musician, I don't know if we have that conversation. At least in conservatory, we didn't. You're just told to go out and do your thing. So I began to think about that. And it was around the same time my mother was really seriously ill. So when the idea came to me to launch a series in the hospital, I got an opportunity to do that for one of my old clients. And one thing led to another with one of her guests, and the next thing I knew, I was having a conversation with the president of Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, and they had never had an ensemble in residence before, much less someone coming in saying, "We'll come and play in your, your space for free to make your patients feel better and the staff." So he basically told me over a 20-minute conversation, "Sure, go ahead and do it." And I just went and did it. I didn't think about how. I just kind of put it together. I was just moved by the whole energy of what my mother went through and just thinking about how that could be of service to other people. So our first concert was December 14th in 2012. We played American carols, French carols, English carols, and it was me and about 5 other women, a little Baroque string band. And I brought my harpsichord in too to the hospital, which was a huge hit. And it was really inspiring. By the time we were done, there were around 80 people in this lobby, and they all just stood there, and we just felt this shift in energy that surpassed any experience I had on a stage. And that's saying a lot, because I pretty much have been on the stage my whole life. But I recognized in that moment that the peace and the energy between the musicians and the patients was so palpable. I couldn't imagine going back on a main stage again. I realized that my calling was to bring music to people, make them feel better. And I didn't know how it was going to manifest, but it went from once a month for 2 months to every week, because the donors we had in Boston were so excited about it. So by this point, I was running the orchestra, still working at Chanel, making my sales goals, and running this series. So all of that led to an opportunity at the Boston Symphony Orchestra. I was recruited by them to work in their marketing department as an AD of marketing, which was a huge opportunity that I will never forget, to be able to provide my perspective and, raise their marketing plans in a way that was going to be beyond what I'd ever done, but they trusted me. Essentially, the CMO at the time, who's now the president of Dallas Symphony, Kim Miltony, she basically saw what I had to offer and just allowed me to be me. And she's actually the only director I ever worked with that allowed me to just be me.
Yes.
And what that meant was that I could show up fully. I could take what their targets were and create things for them that would be beneficial for the company, but also beneficial for our department. And it was all self taught to a certain degree, because I didn't know what I was making social media posts. I was just sharing stories about patients and the musician's perspective. It was just, it probably sounds really innocent and silly now, 10 years later, but at the time it was just, thinking about how I could use my talent to make people feel better.
Yes.
So it was a great opportunity, and I got an opportunity to launch that here in London last year, January of last year. I was having conversations with friends, and they were interested in what I did in Boston, and they said, if you'd be interested in doing this here, we can introduce you to some people. And I thought to myself, well, I'm going to pray about this, because I don't know what this means. And the answer came really fast. So by April of last year, I found myself, in front of 5 different CEOs of different hospitals, talking with them about this series. And I know they were looking at me like, this crazy American woman, what is she talking about? Okay, fine, great. But that meant getting a visa. So I went through that process. So it was a lot of firsts going through this process to get here. But by the time I got the visa and we launched our first concert, which took place October 22nd, I can't believe we'll make a year already. It was already out there, and the reception was so strong. And then I had to launch the charity itself, which is its own beast. And we got our charity status January 20th, 2020. And it's just been a journey and an unfolding of learning how to work within a system that's very different from the United States. But one that really welcomes and supports and champions having music in medical settings. So I feel really lucky that I have a board. They're small and mighty, but they're very, very supportive. And the musicians that we've hired so far before coronavirus have just been incredibly passionate about it as well. So, our next phase is going to be digital. I can't say more about that just yet, but when we do, our impact will be beyond the strategy that I actually put together. And I think that, oddly enough, this coronavirus has given us the space to think beyond what we wanted to do, even though we're new. So
wonderful,
it's
wonderful.
It's an interesting space to occupy in, but I'm happy here.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much, Leslie. It is. I mean, you're doing tremendous work over there, and we all want to support you in any way we can with that important work. You know, we were talking earlier about, you know, being a Black woman in these leadership roles, and I was expressing to all of you that, you know, while I have always wanted to go on the other side of the table, you know, when I'm done, I guess, traveling the world and packing my bags and singing, you know, I've been thrust into a couple of fantastic positions, and it's been quite overwhelming for me to juggle. You know, a friend of mine said, you know, you're used to being in spaces where you are the only Black woman or the only person of color, you know, as a performer. But on the other side, when you are leading and you are a leader, you know, it's a very different experience. So, Nadege, can you speak to your experience?
Yeah, you know, it really is a different experience when you're on the other side and leading. You know, I think Denise, was the first to mention about being the only in a space, and I, you know, can sort of point to that up and down my life, like not even just career. But it's an interesting moment when you cross that threshold into leadership, because all of a sudden, for other people, there is someone that maybe looks like them or looks different in that space. And sometimes that comes with a lot of weight. I mean, the reality is I'm still just one person. So like, I can't, you know, like if this institution that I'm affiliated with, be it, you know, the Minnesota Opera, the St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation, has been doing what it's been doing for all those years before I got there. Let's not think that the day I became board chair or the day I joined the executive leadership team, all of a sudden, like I just can like do whatever I want, because if I had that kind of power, well, let's just talk about how many things would have been different before I got into that team. And so, you know, that's an interesting challenge that I think that we have to balance, because on one hand you have folks who have like hopes and dreams tied up in you, which is fair and unfair.
Yes.
But I also don't want to crush those hopes and dreams, because I'm jealous of them that they have me to look at, because I didn't have anyone to dream about. Like I was like, okay, when I got on the other side of the door, I was like, what happens over here? Nobody's ever told me. So there's a little bit of sort of figuring it all out for the first time, often by yourself. I mean, I will say I've had some people who have been really great mentors, but the reality is, you know, our mentorship base is not the same as others when you start navigating those leadership spaces, because people gravitate to people who look like and feel like and talk like and walk like them. And I don't do any of those things. And so, you know, you're balancing that. But the other thing that I think has been, you know, an interesting place to be as a leader is, you know, when you do find your footing, or when you do sort of feel passionately about something, like you really can make some noise. Like all of a sudden, when I say something, people will stop in a way that they didn't stop before. Doesn't always mean that we'll get to the conclusion that I desire, but, you know, at a different point in my life and my career, it was like, yeah, that's cute, but like, you know, you need to have more development, be more professional. And now at this point, if I say something, it's like, oh, wait, do we need to reconsider that option? Have we not contemplated the equity implications of this decision, or whatever it is, or whatever, you know, whatever my background is that I happen to be bringing to that particular moment in time, my voice has a different resonance. And so, you know, I feel an obligation to use it whenever I can, you know, while also sort of recognizing that, again, I'm one person. And so I have to balance that for myself, because at the end of the day, like I still got to be here tomorrow. So I have to do what I'm doing, but I also have to take care of myself. Like I can't take care of everybody all the time at all moments, even though I see you all nodding. So I feel like we all probably want to sometimes. Like we wish within the scope of our power, we could make it right for everyone. And the reality is I can do what I do, and then tomorrow I can do a little bit more. And those are a lot of the things that I've been thinking about lately. I mean, like I said, you know, I'm sitting in Minneapolis right now. We had, you know, some unrest last night because of some activity downtown. And, you know, I got up this morning and I won't lie, I was like, really, today? Like, my first 3 hours were meetings, and I thought, I don't want to meet with any of you.
Yeah, right.
And it wasn't because of them, right? Like, it wasn't because of, okay, just to be fair, one of my meetings was with all of my Black colleagues at the foundation. I did want to meet with them. That was a great space. But the rest of it, I was like, I don't have energy to give today. Yeah. And I don't have energy to put my mask on today. Mm-hmm. And if you say just the wrong thing, I might snap. And I know I can't snap on you because I'm not allowed to do that in this space.
Yes.
And so there are those times, especially I think right now in this year, where I'm doing a lot of self-protection. Mm-hmm. I'm sort of figuring out, okay, what do I need so that I can keep showing up today, tomorrow, and the next day to keep doing this work in all the spaces that I'm in.
Yes. Miss Denise, yes.
You saw me kind of hand raising there. I
feel snapping and doing all kinds of stuff.
I feel like Nadege is just like pulling everything out and just saying it for me. So thank you. But your representation is hard. It's hard. You're a first, you're an only. It's so often. Fortunately, it's none of the organizations that I'm, currently affiliated with, but I counsel and coach a lot of people who are, in these roles. And, a lot of times the organization will bring to bear all of the force of their resistance around this, or they just immediately expect, okay, so you're going to fix this for us now. How do we do this? They look to you for all of the solutions. You are a checked box. All of those things, come kind of crashing down, into your reality. And it's really, really tough. And I love that you said, for me, it's self-care. And I counsel everyone, Karen, what you're doing today is wonderful in bringing this group of amazing women together. But we have to prioritize self-care and caring about one another and offering each other above and beyond support and, being compassionate with ourselves and with one another, not bringing, criticism or judgment to a situation, but bring support and understanding and empathy. I mean, I know these things sound kind of trite, like, of course we're going to do that, but you have to be deliberate about doing it. You have to be demonstrative about doing it. You have to be deliberate and demonstrative about doing it for yourself, because it is very, very difficult. And remember, representation is still a fraction. It's still, inherent in the word. It's a small portion of, right? And so I always say to people, let's move from representation to permeation. I mean, why not? Why shouldn't that be the beginning of the movement where we are, steeped into the culture and intrinsic to every organization, that exists? Why shouldn't that be what the full breadth and depth of humanity looks like?
Yes, I agree. I'm finding myself that, Karen, you can't answer every email right now. There's things that you have to do before you answer that email, those 5 emails that somebody asked you for something for you to problem solve. No, you need to go warm up. You need to go work on some music, and then you need to go and answer but that's a part of the self-care, right? Yes. I'm learning how to do that, Marty,
I think with women and as Black women, we, I'll speak for myself, but I didn't grow up around role models that, decidedly established this as a priority. Mm-hmm. And, we all grew up, I think many of us grew up around women who were selfless. This is Black woman's narrative, we can take it all, we can deal with it all, we're not going to, we can absorb it all. And first of all, we all know that is a fallacy, and that we are suffering with just all kinds of maladies and challenges as a result of trying to live that narrative. Mm-hmm. So I think we owe it to ourselves and to one another, because we do have to soldier up. We do have to suit up. We got a lot of work ahead. Right. But we can only do that and accomplish that if we put, kind of a hedge of care and shielding around one another like we never have before. So important.
Mm-hmm.
Marty.
Yeah.
I totally agree with Nadege and Denise and Karen with what you were saying as well. And I'm learning. Way to say I'm learning how to read subtexts a little bit better than I have before in what gets requested of people or institutions who find an ease in what they think I may represent or who they think I may be. Especially when it comes to things like rhetorics and ideologies that are completely muddy around diversity or equity or especially from institutions, right? And then what a Black woman with a certain kind of background may do for them and their agenda, right? Like, which is a very one-way street. And I'm a little late to the game learning, but I'm learning now, like, wait a minute. This street does not need to be one way. And like, there are things that I need and I want and that other Black people need and want and other marginalized people that we need, like, this needs to be a bit more reciprocal. I'm finding myself, and with that, right, like always, is that so that, as you're saying, Karen, there is the space to have the priorities for what I want in my life, for who I know I'm called to be in this life, that I can take care of that, myself, my family, right? Like, what does it mean to be a Black wife in the 21st century? A Black mother in the 21st century, right? A classical singer with an education that then checks, like, oh, that's a lot of boxes for a lot of other people's agendas, right? And so that gets to be, I've learned the hard lessons, right? Like, and gotten way off balance with that. And this is why I keep saying I am at a point, I have not thought of myself as a leader. People have called me that and described me that way, but I have really just trying to figure it out and do what I can to, again, like, be responsible for what I'm called to do and help other people do that. And it's, especially, I could even say, like, in classical music, that can put you in, that can put someone in as a Black person and a Black woman in boxes that you don't want to be in. But so circling back, I found myself hoping and wanting to direct people who are ready to pull their weight and do the work that I know I've done, that a lot of other Black people have done, about learning their history and learning about politics, and like pulling on the amazing work that has been laid before, a huge body of work of literature and music and speeches, oratory. There's all these things widely available. And I'm like, feel free to read, listen, and learn as I did, right? Like, and then maybe together we can have some two-way streets or a five-way intersection, right? Like, because it's, as Nadege and Denise were saying, that responsibility, for me, I found that to get to be way too much. And there's so much resource available for people to draw on, so that the conversations are not one way, and so much gets hung on someone. It's not even meaning, like, Nadege, as you were saying, like, day one, it's like, okay, so how do we fix it all? I mean, it is sadly laughable, but I'm learning. That's how, and I'm still learning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Leslie?
I was just going to say, finding myself in a position as a leader is a very interesting mantle to carry, because I don't think of myself as a leader. I just think of myself first and foremost as a musician, and I'm just doing the work. But when you make the decision to run your own company and go and gossip with the other musicians and talk about what happened in such and such group, or you can't sit down and tell them that you're struggling with a decision that will probably impact what happens for the rest of the season. You find yourself in a very solitary space. And I found that element of leadership to be different from being a musician and creating music in your own space, because so much of what we do practicing, it's you're on your own, unless you're in a chamber group or an opera, an orchestra. But leadership, I found, especially as a Black woman in a very, very white field in early music, I didn't have any examples of men that had come before me that was doing what I was doing. So my leadership examples, at least the values that I carry as a leader, came from my family specifically, and my mother and my grandmother. Those core values of what giving is. From Guyana, I remember growing up, my parents being from Guyana, not me. But I remember growing up, and we would send barrels twice a year to Guyana to give to relatives and members of the church there. And these barrels would be filled with clothes and books and shoes and food, and you'd stuff money and socks and put inside of the shoe and put the shoe inside of, like the whole process. So, the whole value of giving back was started at a very early age, and that has helped me as a leader. But then I also had the bonus of my time at Chanel, oddly enough. Almost all the clients I had were either entrepreneurs or philanthropists, and I think that was because of the kind of energy that I gave out, because of the kind of conversations I like to indulge in. And so I got these women and some men, but for the most part, women who were in high positions of philanthropy or entrepreneurship. And so we would have these really dynamic conversations about what leadership meant to them, what philanthropy meant to them. And it kind of got the ball rolling for me from a leadership perspective of what my philanthropy would be, what my currency would be. And it's a different seat to sit as a musician, and you're sitting there thinking, I don't have millions of dollars. What do I have that I can give, to the community? And I'll never forget the day I was adjusting a client's skirt hem with the tailor, and she said something, and I just remember thinking, gosh, I have music. That's where I can lead from. And I don't know why it took the time that it did to gestate, but it did. And I was really grateful, because I entered that space. I was able to have conversations with these same women in a different seat, and to be able to say, okay, I'm now considering to do my own vehicle. What does that look like as a woman? And just to have that conversation as a woman. And then if I ever felt like I was falling out and didn't know where my space was, I would just go back to my mother or an aunt or an uncle, frankly, and get support. And eventually I did find one Black woman who became a mentor for me in Boston. But it was the whole space of leadership. For me, it wasn't about telling people what to do. It was about encouraging them to be the best they could, and to share their gifts at the highest level that they can. And I still believe in that. I mean, it's still weird for me to have as a managing director. I need to have that just so that they can put it on my pay scale. But it's not something that I think about actively. I just think of myself as the vessel in helping other people, find their paths with music in this specific way, and just unfolding the conversation about how the arts can be a form of humanity, which would just make our citizenship better globally. And that's another conversation I never expected as a musician coming up in school, but I've always been open to exploring the other road and be patient. And leadership requires a ton of patience. So I think we're all on the same page when it comes to just finding our spaces as Black women and where our seat really is the strongest, and working and leading from there. And if people in our larger community, if they don't make space for us, that's fine, because there's always places that we can go. I've never been afraid of not showing up as myself in that capacity, but I have recognized that there are always going to be people who are going to try to put you in that box. And I've come to the realization that my box is better when I'm leading it. So I'm happy to be able to collaborate with people that have the same mindset. But as long as the leadership model is not about hierarchy and putting people, being on top of each other, but about being communal.
Okay. I wanted to talk about the three things that came up: mentorship, equity, and allyship. And as you all were speaking so beautifully, I was typing. And as a opera singer, and as somebody who's gone through the traditional American system of going to a big university, going to a big young artist program, starting the career, and I look around and I see not a lot of people who look like me in making decisions. So my mentors don't look like me. A lot of the women who came before me, there's this whole myth of there can only be one, right? One at a time. Which is false, and this whole well, if you don't have mentors who look like you and everyone else has mentors who look like you, then they have the equity, they have the mentorship, and I have to rely on allyship to get to the next, to get to the next rung of the career. So if any of those things jump out at any of you, and anyone can go first, but I really wanted to make sure I touched on those things: that mentorship, equity, and the allyship.
Karen, I was, you brought to mind something for me. I was speaking years ago at my father's memorial services, and I remember saying, there's so many people, he was a very strong leader in his community, but there were so many people there that had been kind of a symbol of it, had been a part of my life and of his life. And I remember saying on that podium that for so many years, I had looked to many of the people in that assemblage. And that I had spent a lot of time seeking mentorship and seeking wisdom. And what I realized on that day and in that moment, standing on that platform, is that I had stepped into the shoes of the elders, and that there were people looking to me, and that this was a brand new mantle that I had to become accustomed to, and I was looking to all of them to help me to step into that place. But I think it's an ongoing kind of living process, that we're all a part of as human beings. But it really is something that one day when you realize that you could spend a lot of time and energy, looking for it from others, and one day you turn around and you say, oh, it's me, and you don't realize how many people are watching you, hanging on to your every word, your every note, listening to you, watching you on social media. We don't even, social media, we don't even realize the number of eyes and minds and hearts, that we're influencing. We call it influencing. We really are influencing. So I think that's important to remember. And then another thing that Marty said that I thought was so important and powerful, when you talked about, inviting people to, just like you did, read and learn and grow, just like we all have to. Nobody has a monopoly on being on the right side of anything in today's world. We all have to do the work. And so when Marty said, inviting people to read, and that is part of the process. People kind of everybody's looking for kind of a magic bullet, some magical solution, but the work has to be done. And when you run into people who can and will are willing to serve and step into, courageously step into, a position of saying, I would like to be an ally, or I believe that I can be an ally. I encourage that, and I try to reward that, and I try to connect with them and bring them along, because we're all kind of going along that path of reading and learning and growing together. And it takes a lot of courage for someone to say, I would like to do that. I want to step into a position of allyship. I was on a Zoom call with one of my fellow SFJAZZ board members not too long ago, and you can change the background in Zoom, and under his background he said, I am an ally. And it hit me. It was the first thing that I saw, and it changed the entire conversation. That we had. It was just so important and so human and so connecting and so powerful. So yeah, when we talk about the diversity, when we talk about the importance of mentoring, all of these things, it's systemic. Just like the bad things are systemic, the good things and the pathway toward better outcomes, that's all systemic. Systemic simply means it's a group and collection of systems that comprise the thing. And so there's so many various kind of networks and opportunities and ways and paths to better and to learn and to evolve. And so all of them, you named all of them, allyship, mentorship, all of that is just so incredibly important. And to your point, Marty, speaking the truth and making demands and speaking the truth to power. I was fortunate enough to be on a ongoing kind of another kind of Zoom call of amazing Black women from probably all over the world, but definitely all over the nation, who were supporting Kamala Harris's nomination prior to and after, which includes her sorors, which, by the way, I am anybody in the audience, aka Scoop. But it included her sorority, but just wonderful group and collection of women who were saying, we don't know, on the front side of the nomination, they were saying, well, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we want to be prepared. We want to be prepared with our talking points. We want to be prepared with our demands. We want to be prepared with how we want to educate people. And so that is an important part of the systemic process to better and to better outcomes.
Yes.
I've found that I had this idea, I'm saying this in past tense, of mentorship as someone older than you and had to be a master in whatever you were seeking their mentorship about, right? Like I don't know, I had that idea. Maybe it's like the arts, or like they're like our old school art, like the apprentice and the master. Like I had this idea of mentorship being that way, but I've learned that I don't think that that's necessarily always the case. And in my experience, the mentorship that comes from relationships with people who are authentic with you, right? Like, is really important. Like it gets like put into other categories, right? Like friendship or a sisterhood, like, or whatever, right? But that's I've learned that that's actually something to pay a lot of attention to in a mentorship kind of way, and also that like paying attention to, like, instead of in a hierarchical way or like this apprentice master idea of mentorship, that a more lateral, I guess, vision or understanding or even set of expectations of what's possible to get guidance and support and mentorship from someone who may be on the journey with you, right? Or may see something within you you don't see, or can help you and give you some critique, right? Like is, well, at least for me, like that's a learning I'm experiencing, and I think it's, I think it may be useful for others too, right? Like, you know, again, like inverting these ideas of what the definition of that could be, and giving more due to who's on the journey with you. Actually, it may not be a master at all, or like know everything, but may know some parts you don't know. I found that to be valuable.
Nadege?
You know, so I think about my background, particularly as an attorney at larger law firms. I mean, if that's not about hierarchy, I don't know what is, right? You start out in a class, you're kind of at the bottom, you move up at some point, you're offered the opportunity to become a partner. And you know, it's interesting. I would easily say that, you know, in my time as an attorney, certainly have had, you know, some mentors. But, you know, I think about the point that you've raised up about allyship and sort of what does that mean in a career. And I'm, you know, going to quote my good friend Sina Hodges, the woke coach, and she has a training for folks called From Ally to Accomplice. And I really think what I want is an accomplice. Like when I look back over my career and the places that I've had the most success, it's because somebody has been sort of with me in my corner fighting the fight. And sometimes they were fighting it before I even knew it was there. And sometimes they were, you know, but it's one thing to say to someone, there's the door to the next step. It's another thing to say to them, oh, and here I packed your bags. I already talked to the people on the other side of the door. They know you're coming. They also know how you're great because I told them. And, you know, like that to me is where, you know, the real success or leadership comes from. And it's not about your levels or hierarchy. Up here can do it. But what I found is that doesn't come as naturally for folks. Like when you're in a space where you're an only, the people that you need to help move you around are going to be people who aren't like you. And what they need to understand is it's not enough to do what you've always done, because I don't show up that way to everyone else. Like you might see me, but they don't see me. And so if you do what you would just typically do, that's not going to be enough to help me. Like it'll get me a part of the way, but it's not going to get me all of the way. And the accomplices really, they see that and they know that, and they may not even realize they're doing it, right? Like I, you know, a boss in my career, I don't know that she would ever name herself that, but was very intentional about, you know, lifting me up where she thought it needed to happen, having conversations when I wasn't even in the room, so that when I had the opportunity to be in the room was like, oh, we've been waiting for you. Like we heard all of this, you know? And so when I think about, you know, how I want to be in somebody's life as they, you know, how I want to be in a sort of mentor relationship, I'm thinking to myself, how can I be an accomplice? How can I be sort of their right-hand woman to set up the path for them as best as I can within the scope of all of my power and relationships and everything. Because I think, you know, we need a lot of that. Like it's going to be a while before it's enough to do what you've always done with everybody else. It's enough to just do a regular mentoring relationship. Until we break down that, you know, glass ceiling, until we sort of like literally break it whole, not just shattering. I mean, it's pretty well shattered, but it's still got that protective coating. Like until we like break it down, it takes more than just like, hey, come to lunch with me. It actually takes, you know, setting up the playing field, leveling it, you know, doing all of this other work. And it's a lot to ask of a person. I mean, it's not a small ask, but those who really understand equity, who really feel it in their bones, not in the way that they can rattle off all the platitudes and the quotes, but those who really feel it, they'll do that work.
How do we help companies in that way? How do we help, you know, so many of us are being asked that don't have that background of EDI. You know, so many of us are getting certificates in EDI at the moment, like right now, you know, and like how do you all, you know, help people like myself and artists like myself who are, you know, being asked to do that kind of work, you know, and how do we say to people, you know, things that we need to say?
I would say, Karen,
I would say that it's, sorry, go ahead.
No, please, Leslie.
I was just going to say to your question, Karen, that I have just found that just speaking it from your heart tends to move the needle, especially asking you to be in this position to be the vessel essentially to help them shift. If they're really intent in doing the work, then they have to listen to what you have to say, because your experience is something that they can never have, and they can't actually pay for in terms of that experience. And so your asset is priceless in that capacity. So I have found when I was being brought into, you know, meetings at the BSO, for example, where, you know, it was senior management, but it was brought along because of my boss at the time wanted me to hear and to see what that was like and to provide my input later. It was critical to have that. So I would say, you know, this is the time to stand in your resilience as an artist, and your resilience as a Black woman, and just own message. And if they're really serious about it, and clearly they are because they've taken you on, then the rest should be easier to navigate. And it is tricky to be able to say those things and be vulnerable, but I think coronavirus has made it very clear that people want truth. People want humanity, they want leadership, they want people to support where they are from the heart, because we've seen what happens when we have leadership models that are devoid of humanity, devoid of empathy. And, you know, we as Black women, we possess that, we embody that. And it's a skill, and it's a gift that you really can't teach people to have. You have to possess it. And I mean, it's a testament to you as an artist and as a Black woman that you've got this position now. So I would say just stand rooted in it, and it might feel scary. Just go for it anyway. I'm sure you'll be great at doing it.
I would agree with Leslie. I would say, Karen, and all of us, to stand, and this is something that I've had to learn, but to stand fully and unapologetically in the truth of yourself. We underestimate the impact of just our presence.
Yes.
We underestimate the impact and the power of our presence. We underestimate that because it's learned behavior. You know, we're looking for those ways that we can accommodate, that we adjust, that we fit in. And the tides have shifted now, where some of the truest paths to change are for us to just stand still and strong in our power and be fully ourselves. And understand that, number one, that is enough, and that is overwhelmingly more than we even realize.
Yeah.
So I think that's one. I think another thing, and many of us have touched on it, but I'm a big stickler for words. Words matter. And I even dislike the word diversity, because with it becomes, all this politically charged kind of language and lack of understanding and misunderstanding, and we end up kind of wearing this as some kind of tag, and we become the diversity this or that or whatever. And I think that we should be very deliberate about our language, and be very clarifying about our language. Hesitate to stop in any conversation and say, well, when I say that, when you say that, what exactly do you mean? Because You know, 99% of the time, you know, you have 16 different people, you have 16 different definitions of a thing.
Yeah.
Right? And so to take the time to establish a common language that people can speak from, you know, is really, really important. And, you know, someone else also said, I think it was you, Nadege, that talked about really being, giving yourself full permission to be as strong as we are, to be as open and to be as vulnerable. We are powerful in our vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we are impactful, just again in our standing, in our presence, giving ourselves full permission to do and be that. Same plus same equals same. My dad used to say. So there's a call to action in this day and time to give yourself full permission to step in, step up, lean in. Um, you know, I think that a lot of people are talking about this concept of not being racist versus being fully anti-racist. It's a little bit analogous to, you know, allyship versus accomplice. It's that kind of that extra, that more. We're in an era and a season where it takes more.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we are more. We are the more. We are that answer. We just have to fully embrace that.
Embrace
and
it.
stand in it.
Yes.
Karen, I think that it is so important, and especially with your platform, to remind all the people who have your ear or may have your ear that Black people have been taking care of ourselves and our music from the beginning in very effective ways, and looking to those institutions might be helpful for them, right? And right, because this is right, it's been done and had always been going on, right? HBCUs have institutionalized themselves, and certainly singing from the beginning in sustainable ways with every odd against them, right? Like every odd. And, you know, maybe we need to call someone from there or like ask them, like, how do you do this in a way that is so welcoming? How do you do that, right? Like ask, because they have over 150 years in the game at that, very successfully with, and they're with odds against them, right? Like these institutions that, right, in the classical music industry, let's say, right, like don't have all the odds against them in that way, right? Or institutions or organizations, like if we just think about New York, like Opera Ebony, Harlem Opera Theater, Opera Noir, Harlem Chamber Players, the Burleigh Society, they could look, study the old programs, study the old structures of these organizations. What exactly does it mean for, I mean, I could take my own story, right? Like a singer coming to New York for the first time with a suitcase and just enough money for some voice lessons, right? Through audition season, sleeping on a couch, best friend's couch, auditioning. To hear from people, you might make sure you go introduce yourself to Gregory Hopkins. Make sure you go to an Opera Noir meeting, right? Like through a network that was nurturing and sustaining for people through a career, right? Like these institutions can ask, because I mean, Black people and other people of color, women, we can make all, you know, a long list, have institutions and organizations themselves that are wonderful models to learn from.
Yes, yes, I agree. It's already there, right?
Absolutely. This is what I mean. Like, please feel free to learn from these wonderful models and all of this work that has been done. Right? Like you don't have to carry that all yourself, Karen, or each of us as individuals. Like there's a whole wealth that I know that I've sprung from. I'm hearing from each of you that is, you know, it may not be in Lincoln Center, but some of my favorite performances and meaningful, and so
don't even happen there. I know.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful point, Marty. I love that. And thank you for mentioning that. And some of those organizations and people that founded that are on here. I wanted to ask both Nadege and Denise, as leaders on arts and arts organizations, like, what is the expectation for you all, for your organization? I don't even know if you can mention, if you can talk about those things, but I think that it's important to know. Everybody always says, well, how do we diversify our boards, and how do we, do all these things? But what are the expectations on your side for the leaders in those organizations to do the work?
Well, I am officially beginning my term as the board chair of SFJAZZ the 1st of September. But I've been a board member now for five years, I believe. And one of the things that was so compelling, there's several things that were incredibly compelling about this organization for me. But one of them is, first of all, it is jazz. It is our music. It originated out of the Black experience from pre to enslavement. We brought these rhythms, we brought these things with us, through enslavement, through Black codes, through Jim Crow, through civil rights, all the way up to now. And here we are in yet another movement where the voices of these artists and how they are chronicling, how they feel, and what they're seeing and experiencing in this moment is going to be just as important historically 50, 100 years from now as what happened, hundreds of years prior is to us today.
Yep.
So I feel like it's so important for us to be stewards of that, and for us to protect that, for us to understand that. And I think that, the organization gets it, and they want to do this. And I think a lot of times it's just, kind of putting a lot of great minds together from different walks of life who have the core kind of shared, kind of core heart value of the importance of this music and the importance of this art form, and that it is bigger, it's transcendent of an art form. It is a human experience. And so I think that having a collection of people together who get that and understand that, and just, helping to guide and shape us to figure out all the ways that we can enhance it, that we can, and another thing that I love about this particular organization is their affinity for taking care of the artists and not just being an organization that benefits from, but understands the pathway, understands the journey. I had a conversation with a few staff members the other day, and we talked about the fact that, our artists, they stand on our stage, but in between, they're experiencing the same pain and grief and horror at what's going on today, and they look like the people who are being shot down in the street. They are these people. And so we can't step away from that. And we can't just applaud them when they give us their absolute best on stage. We have to support them through their entire journey, because their entire journey is what they end up presenting to us on that stage. So I think that I'm so excited and honored. I feel like this was a calling almost. It was a timing thing, that I was already on the board. But I felt like, oh my God, this is so important in this moment in time for me to be, just one of the people who gets to stand in a leadership position and help to steward and nurture, this voice, this important historical chronicling, where we've been, where we are, and where we're going.
Yeah, Karen, thinking about your question, I think, you pointed out people are always saying things like, we need to diversify our board, we need to do all of these things. And I think, way back when I first joined the board, I had a conversation with someone and I said, you can't diversify a board of a major arts institution just by snapping your fingers and inviting people to show up, because it's a whole circle. It's a full sort of circle of life, right? Mm-hmm. Why am I going to come as an individual and take on the weight of these fiduciary responsibilities for this organization, plus give you money, and usually not insubstantial, if when I look at your art, when I look at your staff, when I look at everything, I don't see me. I don't see me in any kind of way, like whatever facet of me that I'm looking at. And so, when you think about how do you do that work, it's got to be happening across the entire organization all at once. Because, I think I said to somebody once, I pay for the privilege of being on the Minnesota Opera Board. And why would I pay for that privilege if being in that space was a burden, or did not feel like it was authentic, or did not feel like it was real to me? So no, I'm not just going to walk out the door and find another Black person to show up, because they don't have an authentic relationship here. And why would they enter this space? That doesn't make any sense. And so what I really appreciate about being on the board of this chairing the board of this organization at this time is Minnesota Opera is really trying to do the work. Yes. Is it perfect? No institution with as many years under its belt that was founded in a white supremacist society is going to be perfect today in 2020. But the fact that we have a diversity charter that names anti-Blackness and names oppression and speaks to the opera's role in combating these things. I mean, that's insane. If you had asked me at the beginning of my tenure as a board member, if that is something that would happen while I was still serving on this board, I would have been like, explain to me what you're talking about. That's not even a universe that exists. Yeah. And so really thinking about how does that show up in the staff, in the artists, who's on stage, who's in the room, what voices are we bringing in? And it's an unfortunate time with COVID and really with the unrest sort of rising up, but I couldn't be more proud to be involved with an organization that is really trying to do the work. And even recognizing that sometimes in doing that work, you might fall and stumble big because you're so public about doing the work. Yes. And that has to be okay, because if the first time we fall, we stop, sort of staying invested in this space, it's not real. Mm-hmm. And I just think that there are so many people in that organization that are really sort of passionate about leading this change. Mm-hmm. And shortly after George Floyd, we convened, I, along with one of the staff members, convened folks who, Black affinity relationships with the Minnesota Opera. And it was such a glorious space because it was staff, there were artists, there were board members, plural. Board members, plural. Not just, so it wasn't just me. I'm not still and only in that space. And I just thought, this is what this should look like. This is that we could have a Zoom call where there were enough faces on the screen that I was like, okay, let me make sure I look at everybody and acknowledge them at some point, was really a beautiful thing. But it's only a thing that happens if people are doing the work. And so it's not the easiest time to come into a leadership role of an arts institution, right? I mean, there are a number of challenges across the sector, but I'm fueled by the fact that there is sort of real effort and sort of passion and a groundswell across the board, the staff, that it's across everywhere, because that charter that names anti-Blackness and oppression, the board voted on that unanimously. Mm. It wasn't just created by the staff and they were like, here, we did a thing. Before it showed up on that website, there was a board meeting the Thursday of the week that George Floyd was murdered, in which we voted on that. Mm. And it was unanimous, and that's powerful. That's really powerful.
Karen, one more thing I would add to this, Nadege said this, Don't underestimate also kind of your right brain assets when you bring it to an administrative or business setting, because this opportunity in this pandemic era to be creative and to be innovative is really, really important and profound. And you bring that just, just by nature of the way your artistic lens and the way that you look at life, right? Living a creative life is something that you espouse and we all espouse. And so don't underestimate, when you're in a setting where everyone's kind of talking about fundraising and business and kind of operational things, don't shy away from raising, that creative lens and that artistic lens and that way too, because that's what will inspire people to innovate and to think differently around, well, we've been doing it this way, but why not that way? I mean, Nadege, I would love to see you all commission, a young composer, a young Black composer, to do an opera on the George Floyd situation, right? I mean, I think that I'm sure you've already thought of that, but I would love to see something like that done. There's so much opportunity in all of our various spaces for us to bring the benefit of our right and left brain into the conversation.
Yeah, I think they're sort of working on something now, but I love Minnesota Opera and all the great things they're doing. And I know Ryan and Pretty and all of those guys really, and the whole organization. And my boss lady, Sue Dixon, who is the new general director of Portland Opera, is on here. And she is about the business and doing the work. And she is making space for me to do all of the things you all are encouraging me to do. So I just had to shout Miss Sue out. She is wonderful. As we wrap up the time, because you all have to go and continue to do the thing, to do, on with your life and all the amazing things. But I would love for you each to speak to the audience about something that's on your heart and how we can move forward and how we can uplift one another and support. Because I do believe in this time now, all the arts organizations need one another. There is not going to be this thing of I'm doing this thing over here and you're doing this thing over here, or Leslie starting her own organization over here and Marty, doing the work and singing and doing all these amazing things. Like we have to do it together. And I don't believe that art form is dying. I don't believe music is dying. I don't believe in any of those things. But it's just about us, insieme, as they say in Italian, coming together to uplift and do the thing. So please, each of you take the moment to speak. Leslie, you go first. She must be behind us.
I would say that one of the things I find for organizations moving forward is definition of community. Community engagement specifically is so targeted with such a particular lens. It's the definition of lack. I call it cultural tithing because organizations are rewarded for a specific amount of money to do a specific amount of work. And the benchmarks are, they're incremental. And I know in some organizations they actually do have strong benefits and there's growth there. But I find the definition of what community is very limited when it comes to the community and what we bring to the table. And I think that if there's a way to, when working with these organizations in positions like yours and even in positions like ours, whether we're board members or staff members, that we redefine what community is. Again, this virus has made it very clear. Everybody needs somebody, right? So this hierarchy model isn't working anymore. And we really just need to look at the community from a global perspective. And I don't mean in the actual planet. I just encompassing parts of our community in terms of class, in terms of race, in terms of orientation, the whole box. Well, box, yes. And see how, if all those are brought together as equal partners, then the organization's goals will surpass what it ever dreamt of, because they see the community as an equal partner, not as, well, Bank of America gave us $250,000, so we're going to give them all the shiny toys. But, you know, the guy owns the restaurant around the corner, he only can give us 5, so we can only give him this. Everybody needs each other. And, you know, I hate to say it, patriarchal perspective when it comes to community has run its course. I think that we need to think about, I don't know necessarily if it's a matriarchal thing, but it's definitely a more well-rounded definition of what that is. And I think that ultimately elevates what our art can do, because no one sits there feeling like they're being left out, because they're all seen. So when it comes to where organizations can go in that regard, I think that the definition of community will definitely shape that better in the 21st century, if we think more globally and less in terms of hierarchy.
Yeah, I agree. Marty?
I would say, well, I come back to what I've been talking about in our conversation, which is for me to you know, step one is to sing. And I think that's the truth for institutions and organizations, meaning the number one priority has to be the artists. And that if institutions and organizations support them over everything else, they will thrive, right? Like it is, I think that is, and that is, I mean, like, it's kind of simple, but I think also very rare, oddly, especially from the big institutions whose decisions and responses to the pandemic around public performance and paying people on their roster, I have found to be disappointing. And it's been a priority for the Burleigh Society to do to take that approach. First, number one, support artists, because as Denise was saying, the creativity is happening. And if artists are supported to continue to do that in whatever way, however it can be distributed, in whatever form, the point of being an artist or being an arts institution will be taken care of. But I think that that's a very important priority, especially now for institutions.
Absolutely. I just want to shout out, I want to say I look forward to Marty's curating some amazing projects after this time, during this time. I'm sure you can sing about so many things. And so I look forward to that. I look forward to curating something with you. That would be amazing. And I just want to shout out Burleigh Society for talk about supporting artists. My phone blows up. I think it was like last month. The society gave grants to artists.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to speak to that, but I just have to let you speak to that. Sure. It was tremendous.
So it was, I can remember well, it was the day, what was it? Was it March 13th, everybody? The day where, at least New York, like it was like the shutdown. Like it was like, this is the pandemic today, right? And the Burleigh Society co-founder, Lynn Foote, and I were actually on the brink of doing a whole set of strategic planning for the next 3 years. And it was like, okay, so those plans are clearly not going to work. And it was, I mean, it wasn't even a second thought. Like I remember waking up and being like, well, we've got to get some support for people, because what's going to happen? And all the implications of performances being shut down, that didn't happen yet. But for me, it was very obvious that that was a very important thing that we had to do immediately. And so what the Burleigh Society did was set up a fundraising campaign for an artist relief fund to give an tax-free, unrestricted grant to everyone who has performed with the Burleigh Society. We want to continue to try to do more, but everyone who's performed with the Burleigh Society would get this grant. To do with whatever they wanted and whatever they needed. That's the point, right? It's to feed and prioritize artists, because I know myself, if you give an artist, let them know they're seen and heard, like, we recognize you as an artist and here's some support to be that and do that, without even, no stipulations, no restrictions, no reporting back, nothing, just some support when the rug's being pulled under people. And already amazing things are happening, right? And the response was tremendous. And that's a big value for the society. It's a value for me personally, right? Like, this is what I mean by like singing and helping singers. And like, it's very, very simple. And for bigger institutions, very doable. I encourage others to do it. It's because, you know, even like in this post-pandemic world, whatever and whenever that's going to be, like, what is an arts institution without the artists? Like, if you aren't feeding the people, like, what is the point? Like, it's just,
yeah.
If there's no singers for the opera company, like, what are you doing? What's the... So, anyway, but that's what it was. And anyone who would like to give to the Burleigh Society, burleightsociety.com is the website. There is a donate button. We welcome donations of any size. And I can assure you, we give it right. You can ask people who work with us. We do our best to maximize our funding to get it back to be in the model of Harry T. Burleigh, who was undergirding the singers that we all are standing on the shoulders on himself, but Marian Anderson, Paul Robeson, on and on and on, right? Like, we just want to do that.
Yeah, my phone was blowing up like, oh my God, you know. I was so happy for everybody. I mean, it was a blessing. It was a blessing for a lot of people. So,
well, I'm glad.
Yeah, so no.
That's the point.
Yes.
That's the point. Yeah.
Denise and Nadege, you wrap us up.
One thing I want to make sure that I do, since Marty, you raised the Burleigh Society, I want to invite folks to experience SFJAZZ as it has pivoted to a very expansive digital program that, you know, anybody can attend the concert wherever you are. You don't have to dress up. You can sit wherever you are and you can experience this wonderful music. And there's a program called Fridays at 5 that has been phenomenally successful. And we're particularly proud of it because a large percentage of the proceeds through the tip jar, the virtual tip jar, goes directly to the artists, and in some cases, fully to the artists. There have been a few examples of that. This week, we've got a wonderful program with celebrating. It's the final of the final segment in a tribute to Rain Shorter. We've got Joshua Redman and Ambrose Akinmusier and many others that I'm going to forget to name. Please forgive me. But I wanted to mention that. And then finally, what I would say to the audience is about art and the power of art. Art moves, and the reason why we're all so drawn to it, because there's something within us that is connected to it. But art has the power to move the human spirit. And we live in these dramatically polarized communities, we live in a dramatically polarized society right now. And to Leslie's point, you know, the patriarchal and the hierarchical method and systems are no longer going to work and be effective. I don't know if I'll still be alive when we have made this transition, you know, from that, you know, from this agentic to communal type of society. But we are on the precipice of it, and every single one of us is playing a role in that. And the movement of the human spirit is where human beings can come together and have new kinds of conversations and new kinds of understandings. We all know, we've seen people moved by music or artistic experiences where nothing else would have moved them. From an idea, from a concept, from a position, from a state of mind. Art has the power to do that. So we are participating in something that is so powerful and going to be so important to our children, our grandchildren, for the future. And what greater calling is there for us to be a part of a better future? For me, that's what it's all about.
Yes.
Well, first I want to say, Karen, thank you so much for pulling us all together, for putting me in this space with these fabulous women, and to the audience, I think we're in this moment, sort of taking off on where Denise was, like, art has the power to shape narratives. And in these sort of classical art forms, we have always had a lot of excuses as to why we couldn't do certain things. Well, we've got to fill the seats. We've got to, just whatever they were. And the reality is we're in a moment where there is nothing but creativity available. There is no expectation. Nobody knows what you're supposed to do during COVID. And the way that we show up, the fact that, people are streaming art and you can see art from companies that you wouldn't physically have access to, it begs the question, are you doing what you've always done? Are you taking advantage of this moment to open up the stories and the experiences and introduce audiences to the people that before you may have felt there was a perceived barrier? I'm telling you, that barrier is gone. It's gone right now.
Yes.
And so if there was ever a moment to do something totally different, this is that moment.
Yes.
And just carry that forward, use this moment now and then carry that forward into sort of what is our better normal.
Yes, ma'am. That's it. That's it. There's no barriers. Let's do the thing. Let's carry it forward. I do want to mention Leslie's organization, Lionsgate Music in London. Please support that. She's doing amazing work at the hospitals and chamber music. So don't, support us all. I want to thank you all for being here. I want to say, please do not hesitate to say, Karen Slack, I need you to do, I'd like you to do, would you come? We are now sisterhood. We are family now. We all know each other.
Yeah.
We spent 2 hours together now. So that goes.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you to the audience that tuned in, and there'll be people coming in. I forgot to remind everybody it's early today, but there'll be people coming in all day. The stream stays up, as everyone knows, and as soon as we're done, it goes to YouTube. Kiki Conversations has a YouTube page, so you can share that, like that, or just share from Facebook. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in today. Next week, we're back to our regular 8 o'clock at Thursday and Saturday. Please tune into Dallas Opera's Instagram page because we have a special announcement. Kiki is moving on up too. So anyway, thank you all. Have a great day, and I'll see you on the other side. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.